Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second entry into the series Rocket Talk, where we just chat about anything South African Rocket League. I am Skill Steel, and with me, as always, well, since one episode, Ultrism. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, I must admit. I'm excited about that. That first one was, it was great to get involved with it, get to chat about the local scene, what's going on, some of the local tournament players, the local teams that we've had coming through, and get to see really just the different levels and the different styles that people have to come into Rocket League. What do new players have to expect? What do old players have to remember? Reminisce about the old times. It's good stuff. I enjoy looking back at the old school versions of Rocket League. Obviously, you and I have had a lot of history in the Rocket League scene, so it's always fun to go back and just be like, wow, man, I completely forgot that team or that tournament even existed. And I mean, that's kind of what we're doing tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, last week we kind of analyzed or cross-analyzed most of the players, their progression, new players, what they should be doing, and this podcast this week is actually a nice one because that nostalgic feeling, just as you mentioned now, where the entire Rocket League scene started, where it came from, all those teams, how they evolved, um, and that it kind of creates this nostalgic feeling, just to like remember where it all began. And one big part of what we mentioned last week was VS. Now I wasn't too like knowledgeable in the scene back then, but Ultrism, you're quite knowledgeable on VS and where they started. I mean, I believe they were called Digital Gaming League back then.
Oh yeah, the DGL. The DGL was big. I must admit, like that was where Rocket League really started taking off. So in the beginning there were a couple of local tournaments. I remember playing in the first tournament ever, and that was with just some of my random friends. That was when I was a gold level player, and we came second in that tournament. If that gives you some idea of what we started, like gold was second place, and we were just like blown away because the guys were hitting aerials. They jumped above us, and we were like, how are we supposed to defend against flying cars now? And then like it really picked up, especially when VS got involved. So Digital Gaming League at that stage got involved. They came in and they did a really cool thing because they started with just like Dota and CS:GO, and then they just in 2017 they exploded and they were like, we're gonna pull in a huge number of different things. That's when they picked up Overwatch. They did Call of Duty. They did this Rocket League, and it was really cool to see the big companies taking notice of at what at that stage was a very small game. And so they opened up a decent sized tournament with the LAN finals that people could play in weekly ladders, and that was when I was still actually competing in it. And so to get to go through it and actually join VS Gaming was really cool. And actually, at the beginning of VS was when I just left my competitive team and started commentating. So I got to see it from the other side there, where I saw the growth of VS from the production side as well, and got to go to the LAN finals of that. And the best part about that was not having to actually worry about competing in the LAN finals. I got to see it and see just like the intensity that things had got up to. And that was like a year or two after Rocket League tournaments were hosted in South Africa. So it exploded from that point, and ever since then the growth has been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, as I think Digital Gaming League back then kind of for me was the starting point of it all. It was like the core of how Rocket League in our country evolved. They kind of set the tone, set the bar. They got it going, they got the ball rolling. And even though they're not active in it anymore, they really did still play a pivotal role in actually evolving our community, and getting lands going, getting leagues and tournaments going. And I think inspired a couple of other people that to actually also start, like Momentum and Metal State joined in. So it all started basically back in VS. But also part of VS was the way that they did the league and their games back then. I remember when I joined VS for the first time with the Rocket League Gen X Griffins back then. I can't remember what rank I was, but well, people were crazy back then. But the format they had back then was it kind of promoted progression for me. You start off, I think there was ladder, then there was second division, then there was first division, then premier division.
Mm.
I don't know where you ended up, Alt, but I struggled to just get into first division. But it's that kind of that feeling of progression. You start off in ladder, you win your way through ladder to get into second division, that gives you that feeling of achievement, that sense of I'm actually getting somewhere, I'm actually doing something. And then also just winning through second, getting into first, and getting into Premier. And I think VS really did the Rocket League format really well at the start. It kind of promoted new teams not to get demotivated by saying, oh, we're just going to get wrecked by these top teams every single time. Why even try? But instead of that, they actually got to a point where they played their own level. And when they outcompeted their own level, they got to level up, so to say, to the next level, which was second or first or wherever. And that kind of, it was a really, really nice format. And I really enjoyed that. And it's so sad to see that they changed the format for some reason, where they started doing 4 cups throughout a season, I think. And these cups had prize pools at the end of it, but it was double elimination or single elimination, which means these lower end teams were just getting wrecked every single week. And I can't imagine that they felt that sense of, we can do this, next week maybe, or something like that. It really felt like they were just getting pushed into this little bottle and they couldn't get out. So I don't know. The format for me was really nice at the beginning. I think that was when you also still got competed, I think, back when it was still like the leagues. But yeah, for me, that was a really, really nice format.
I must admit, that's something that I would like to see other tournament organizers start pulling in, is just that like you say, the proving grounds where new teams could come in and not have to face big teams going into the first round. I mean, they were great because it meant that good teams could make it to the finals and there was multiple opportunities, so it wasn't just like one ladder where only a certain few teams could excel. But they kind of ended up doing that at the end of it with the different legs, if you want to call it. The first round was really play through it, and so teams could get motivated to build themselves up. And like the first time I actually played for VS, it was a Dota league that I was in at that stage, and it was great as a new Dota player to not have to face against the top teams because it was so demoralizing, like you say. And then when we swapped to the leg stage, the qualifying tournaments, there was just like the first round, there were 4 teams going into it where you were like, all right, forget about every other team. Like, I don't even remember 2 of the other teams that were in those tournaments because they were such a non-factor in those tournaments. They just came in, they got knocked out in the first round, and that was it. That was the end of their round. And they had multiple opportunities. But, in the first tournament, you had the top team go through, instantly qualified. Cool. Then the second leg, the second team went through. The third leg, the third team went through. And so, while there were multiple opportunities for progression or for qualification, there was no room for growth in those legs. And I wouldn't like to go back. I mean, VS did give us the opportunity of playing around with multiple formats. That was one of the best things that they did, was the structure building up to the LANs had its own format, and they swapped it after the first year. And then actually at the LAN finals, I remember that first LAN finals had a lot of animosity towards it because it was single elimination. And it meant that there were guys who flew up from like Cape Town for the weekend, and on the first day, they lost their first game, and that was it. They were done for the whole weekend, and they had spent like 1,000 rand, 1,500 rand each to get up there for the tournament. They played 1 game of Rocket League, so literally it was a best of 5, so they played 3 matches, and they lost, and they were out. And the guys were sitting there going, why did we come up for effectively half an hour's worth of Rocket League? What was the point of this? So, that was the teething problems that VS really helped the community figure out, because you can't hold it against VS either. So, they came through, and they allowed people to figure out, and I think a lot of other tournament organizers from that point onwards were able to draw from that knowledge and go, hang on, single elimination works in like the long games like Dota where you're playing an hour per match or something like that. Sure, fine, then there's a lot of opportunity for teams to prove their worth and they get a lot of game time. When you're coming in with Rocket League where it's super short, you can't afford to do that, and we can actually fit in more games. So, that sort of initiation and innovation that they took was important, and there were a lot of mistakes made, but they were important mistakes to make. And since then, I think a lot of the tournament organizers have picked up the correct way of doing it. I would love to see, though, more leg-based tournaments coming in where, in the Challenger division or the lower division or something like that, the guys still have an opportunity to play against teams of their similar rank. And I would like to see some sort of basic prize pool or something like that in the lower division to keep the guys motivated, to keep them coming in. And because when you get to the end of that league, if you've managed to do well in your leg, you could then move up to the upper legs and then have a really big shot at the finals. But if you don't, you don't feel like you've wasted now 6 months of the year playing a game where you're like, all right, great, we've trained so hard and we got knocked out in the first round. That sort of format change is such a delicate balance, and VS tried hard and they did well, but they've now dropped Rocket League, and it's understandable they're focusing on more of the bigger titles. But I would love to see Rocket League coming back in, and especially if we can keep the growth up, getting some big tournaments like that out of VS. But the nice thing is they set that foundation where now a lot of the other tournament organizers have jumped on and gone, we see what you did, we see the sort of support you got, and there was a lot of support for VS even in those days.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the kind of format that VS ran back then, you still had a lot of teams entering. Because of that league format. And we saw, I can't remember the exact numbers, obviously, because it's quite a while back, but I remember that first, second, and Premier Division, and even the ladder was stacked with teams. The ladder might have some teams in Prim and First and all that, but there was a lot of teams. They were all stacked, and they were playing on a regular basis. And kind of with time, that fell off. And I don't blame VS for changing the format. That was not the reason that teams stopped entering. But I do believe somewhat of the reason that they stopped entering was that they were playing high-level teams that they couldn't quite compete with. But my interest, Altruism, question for you. So we have a couple of names on the sheet here. Back then, Mother and Snowy, obviously big names back then even. They still dominated the scene. And then also names like CPZ, Lion, and Timmy. They were in Berserk Gaming. Now, I think they came after you stopped competing. I think back then, I don't know about Lion and Timmy, but I don't know where CPZ was before that.
CPZ actually joined us. That was the first time I really got to know CPZ. So back in the day, like the original tournaments that came, and when I joined it, like after the first tournament, we did the Mad Hatters tournaments. That was a lot of fun. And I remember posting on like the original Rocket League South Africa group, guys, I'm gold, I want to play decently. I was still on PlayStation at that stage. And I joined up with Nyanfo. Nyanfo, if you guys recognize the name, he's a god in basically any game that he played. So he played Rocket League for us, and he was the best in South Africa by a long shot for a while. Then he went over to Overwatch, and he dominated there for a while. Now he's playing PUBG and Warzone and stuff, and he's still dominating in those games. Ridiculously good gamer. But it formed a good team, and that's where he and I started together, and then we swapped teammates at that stage. We picked up Elf at that stage for Rocket Eclair. We played as White Rabbit Gaming for a while, and so we could, we got recognized as a really good team in the country. And then we started swapping around, getting support from different players. Rocket Eclair formed with Elf. I then swapped to the casting role, and CPZ actually came in as our reserve. There was a stage where I outranked CPZ. It's like the pride of my life was back in the day I could compete with CPZ, and I was like, this guy's pretty good. Like, let's put him in as the main roster and I'll play reserve. Oh man, those I look back at old videos going, yeah, this was the time. So people don't recognize me as a player anymore. It's sad, but I jump into six mans.
They will definitely remember you now. Yeah, but that's crazy. It gives that nostalgic feeling, just remembering when, it was still. I think there's still a stream or a VOD up from, it was still DGL back then, and Elf casted it. It was between Aerial Flops, IVE Aerial Flops, and some other team. But it's just crazy to see. And I know a lot of the RLCS players, they also quite often reference back to season 1 of RLCS. And they look back and they think, wow, they played so bad. We played so bad. What were we doing? And I think it's the same feeling. And I don't know about you, Alt, but I mean, if I go look back at my old games that were still streamed, I'm like, who is this kid? Like, is he still plat and gold? What is he doing? What is this rotation? Why is he ball chasing? So it's just crazy to see. And you speaking about CPZ being a sub back then, it just emphasizes the player progression throughout the years and throughout the months, where they started and where they are now. It's just crazy.
Dude, I just look at my old replays, like the stuff I saved on Rocket League, and I go back and I was like, ooh, this one, like top goal, best ever goal or something like that. And I look at it and it's not even like a backboard redirect or something. It's just like me hitting it off the wall kind of thing into the goals. I'm like, I was a god at that stage. And now I'm like, wow, that's like base level things now. And it's the beauty of the Rocket League scene, though, is that it's had to innovate so much. And like you say, you go back to season 1 RLCS, and the guys were just amazed to see an aerial play or something like that. And it shows. And that's where I think the top players in South Africa are really excelling, and I think that's what's putting a lot of the lower level or the newer players off, is they're like, how are these guys doing this? I don't understand. You got to remember that people like CPZ or Elf have been playing this game for 6 or 7 years. They did what these guys are doing now, and we don't even recognize the talent that there is in these lower level teams. I don't want to call them low level, because they were literally the same level as we were back then, playing those games and winning tournaments with very, very mediocre or very, very like commonplace skills there, where a passing play was unheard of. A backboard redirect didn't exist. No one was going up on the backboard. Now guys are like off the ceiling, redirects, then flip reset off the backboard, and then scoring a goal. And you're like, wow, okay, they've chained like 7 different skills together. So, that sort of progression of players comes with the fact that the scene in South Africa is actually really well established. You talk about stuff like XD, Mother and Snowy. Mother and Snowy were also like reserves at one stage. I remember Snowy playing for a while. There was No Clip at that stage as well. And I remember like 4 years ago, No Clip had like 6,000 hours in Rocket League. 4 years ago. Oh, I miss No Clip just because of that, because I was like, he was at that stage the best aerial player in South Africa, without a doubt. Everyone was like, this guy is a god. He I think was the first guy to actually do like an air dribble in the air, and people just saw this guy floating over the top of them going, how am I supposed to defend against that? Where is this guy going? He's touched the ball 3 times in the air. What madness is this?
Just send him overseas. Just get him over there. just not here. Just like over there. No, but that's crazy. And I mean, we spoke a lot about VS and Digital Gaming League with their formats, but also one thing, and you also touched on it, is their LAN events at the end of the year. I think VS really did it well last year, where they kind of changed the format to be, and as you mentioned, people rocked up there from Cape Town, they played one game, got wrecked, and then it's like, why did I spend my money on this? And what VS did so well last year is that I think you played a minimum of 5 games. Like if you could still go out on day 1, but you played a lot of games. And it was so cool for me to see the RK guys. Like, they not the best players in Rocket League. They have their skills, they have their talents, but they're not like up there high level. But it was just so great to see. They came up there, their shirts, they came as a family. They like enjoyed the games they played. They even stayed afterwards. They played some private matches, Rumble, I think they played, or whatever. It was so cool for me to see that people still came up to these LAN events, and it was just like, we're gonna just enjoy this, But I think VS's format really promoted that feeling of, we're still gonna play a lot of games. It's not gonna be a one trick pony. But also one big thing about VS also is the prize pools, which I really think kind of not inspired, but motivated people to actually show up to the lands from Cape Town. I think that was one big thing for me as well, because back then I was part of IVE with Fallis and Shadow, and IVE actually sponsored my plane ticket to go over to the LAN. Obviously, the deal was that I think they wanted some of the prize pool, but I think what I actually want to touch on is that a lot of these big orgs, they don't want to spend money on players flying somewhere and there isn't going to be a payout. They want to make something back on it. And I think that's a big thing that these tournament organizers and organizations in general just have to keep in mind, is that in our country, sadly, you cannot keep a long-term tournament going or league going if there isn't an incentive at the end, which I think is really, it kind of hurts our community in general. But prize pools in this country is sadly something that isn't necessarily necessary, if I can put it that way, but it really does, I think, help teams. I mean, if it's a league or something that has a prize pool at the end of the year, like a big LAN event that PS did, I think it does it way better because teams actually have something to play for. They keep in mind that, okay, there's something at the end of the year, this big thing that we have to grind for. We actually get something out of it. So I think for these big organizations and on all that, it kind of like it makes the image a little bit better on the tournament if there's a prize pool. But what are your thoughts, Arch? I don't know.
Oh, no, you're 100% right. I think the two things that players will dedicate time for is if there's a LAN, just that experience of going to a LAN is huge. And people will go to a LAN, like not just players, but spectators, people come together. Like you say, people, like teams come together as a family. And I really feel like LAN events do a lot for team cohesion. Guys who come together, they stay in the same hotel or something like that if they've traveled far, or they meet up on the day in the same shirts and stuff like that. It builds such morale, and you get to know the other players as well at a LAN environment where, especially if you're playing multiple games like they did at VS last year, was you could then play the guys and then get up after the match, go chat to them about the match, being like, wow, dude, like, I didn't know about you beforehand, but you pulled off some really sick moves, and you really get to know other people. I remember meeting DF the Man at these tournaments, and afterwards, regardless of how the actual tournament went, we went out for drinks and pizza and stuff afterwards with other teams, and it really built the community at that stage. So if you can have LANs or a prize pool or both, both is obviously your top priority. This year it's kind of fallen apart, but prize pools and LANs are how you get people involved in it. It really makes it an event. People sitting behind their computers for nothing, the guys are just going to play quick play. The guys are going to just jam together as a team and jump into competitive because it's actually like more exciting for them to get that champ rank or something like that than it is for them to get a bragging rights tournament or something like that. So, especially when you're talking about people like orgs, people who are now putting forward money to these guys to say, guys, go to the tournament. There's got to be some sort of return on investment. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, any tournament is a business decision. And so there's got to be some sort of return on investment for everyone involved. No one's going to put 6,000 hours into Rocket League if they're not getting anything out at the end. They could put that time into a different game which has a big prize pool or something like that. And so, the tournament organizers have to take this into consideration. The LAN finals would be the best thing you could do just to build hype and build exposure for your brand. But also just like a prize pool is what's going to get the top level guys there. The bigger the prize pool and the more consistent the prize pool, I think, the more it's going to affect how well your tournament is supported and how much hype is built around it. I mean, if you put up 50,000 Rand towards a tournament, you are going to have so much hype. People are going to play for a year if they need to do it. And, especially when VS had the different legs and the different leagues and stuff like that, that's what guys are playing for at the end of the day, is they're like, there is a big goal at the end. No one's going to shell out $1.50 per player to get from Cape Town to Joburg to play in a tournament if everyone's going to face like 300 Rand at the end of the day. You're not even covering your costs of getting there. And so like people start going, is it worth me even coming through to these tournaments? So, between those two, I think that's what is really a big motivator in any scene, in any game really, but Rocket League as well, is just got to get these guys some sort of reason, some motivation to get to the end of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of those organizations that we speak about is this these brands that get involved. And I know Digital Gaming League, Telkom was involved back then, right?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah, Telkom basically started the entire thing, if I'm not mistaken, or they were the biggest sponsor, and the biggest sponsor now is Telkom, especially for CS:GO and Dota, which VS is having massive prize pools for. I don't know if you've seen Alt, but
it's like 500,000 or something.
It's crazy. CS:GO plays for a lot of money, and then it just makes me wonder, why did I even choose Rocket League at this point? Like, why didn't I put in like 4.5k hours into like CS:GO or something?
That's a big consideration. Is like when you're investing enough time. I mean, if you think about it, like to learn a musical instrument is something like 80 hours. Or like learning a language is like 80 hours. If you're putting in 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 hours, you could have literally learned like half the languages on earth kind of thing by that stage. Why are you doing this? Is you got to put it in. And if you can put in 6,000 hours into Rocket League and get paid 300 Rand, or 6,000 hours into Dota and be playing for a prize pool of R500,000. I mean, there's not even a question there.
There's no question, dude. You don't even try and consider it. You're like, nope, I'm going for the money. It's the money. But I mean, yeah, you're so deep into the community now. You're so invested in the community. Like, you can't. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk of people like they don't know if they want to continue with Rocket League. They don't know if they want to keep going with this. There's no tournaments. There's no involvement. No orgs want to pick them up. There's no sponsorships. But I mean, I'm also guilty of one of those, like saying, oh, what is the point? Rocket League isn't going anywhere. But then you're kind of in the back of your mind, like, but you invested so much time. Imagine you stop now, get rusty, come back, and there's this big tournament, and you can't do even one aerial. You kind of that scared of letting yourself slip. But getting back to this brand involvement, we have names Logitech and Asus. I'm not sure if they already sponsor some teams. But in terms of getting involved in our Rocket League scene, there's gonna have to be like tournaments with consistent prize pools. There's gonna be something that has to pull them in where they can get, like you said, a return on investment. And sadly, our Rocket League scene right now doesn't have that. But imagine that's like one of the hopes I have with this free to play update as well is that we have this massive growing player base that kind of evolves over like a set of months where we can have massive tournaments going, not even prize pools, but just getting consistent tournaments going that these brands can see there's involvement here. And I mean, I think some of them are self-sustained. I don't think they require a tournament with a prize pool to have that return on investment. I think most of it can just be marketing for them. But I mean, there has to be something that pulls them in, keeps them here. And unfortunately, that is going to be something like VS doing with their CSGO. They see there's massive prize pools, there's involvement, teams are getting sponsored, but it's because there's this consistency in the way that they handle their tournaments, teams competing on a regular basis. And I think that's like one of the biggest things, unfortunately.
It's kind of a cyclic thing when you start to look at it. Is no tournament is going to put up a massive prize pool if there's not going to be people watching it, or if they're not going to get any return on investment. So, you need to get dedicated players to play in tournaments. If they play in tournaments, then they get views. There's a lot of support for tournaments. Then tournament organizers are going, all right, let's put up more money. If there's more money, you get more players. The more players you get, the bigger the scene grows in South Africa. And so more people start watching the tournaments. You get better views on your streams, on your finals and stuff like that. As you get more streams on your views on your streams, then you start to see more investors, more sponsors are going to be looking at it going, all right, that's cool. Like, we actually can put some advertising in here and get 500 people to watch it. When you get the sponsors involved, you get more prize pool, you get more players, you get other organizations starting to pick up teams and actually dedicate time and resources towards it. As you get more players, you get bigger tournaments. So it's this really big cyclic thing that comes down. And the fact that Rocket League has been building for a couple of years now means that we're a little bit along that process of the cyclic. In the beginning, the first tournament was for Roman's Pizza vouchers. That's the one I watched, or I entered in the one. It was great. And then the first the first round of VS Gaming was like a 3,000 Rand prize pool. And then the second leg was like a 6,000 Rand prize pool. And now we're getting like 10,000 Rand tournaments and stuff like that. And so like that sort of cycle is really good to see. And the fact that Rocket League is still growing in South Africa to such an extent. I mean, on the Rocket League Facebook page, there were 24 new people who joined just this week. And so, that cycle is definitely working. But I'm really hoping that there's some sort of big change that comes at some stage as gaming as a whole is taken more seriously by sponsors and by companies, that they can start putting in towards prize pool. We've got people like ATK who've joined this year, who've now started sponsoring much bigger tournaments. And that sort of thing is so good to see, because that's the sort of snowball effect that we really need to see in any game. And in Rocket League, it's such a spectator-friendly sport that even if you don't know the game, there's no spells to learn. There's no characters to learn. There's not just, ooh, something happened. I don't know what, but now half the people are dead. It's like you can tell when someone's scoring a goal, right? It becomes very hype. And so I think Rocket League has that ability to just keep growing as it goes. And with the free-to-play, it means that we can now boost that growth even more. so that we got new players coming in. They're going to be like, oh, geez, I picked up this thing. I personally know at least 6 or 7 people who've picked it up in the last 2 weeks because of the free to play, and they're like, well, okay, we're not good now, but we're going to join in. We're going to form some teams. We're going to train, and that sort of cyclic effect is what's going to grow South African Rocket League, and just the way it has grown international Rocket League.
Yeah, and I mean, as you touched on it, these brands and all that getting involved with CS:GO and ATK, as we mentioned, it's international marketing, right? I mean, I know ATK sent over a CS:GO team a while back, and they're planning on doing it again now. And those players that got sent overseas, Sonic, I think, is one of them, and JT, they got picked up by big names like Cloud9. They got picked up by Cloud9 for CS:GO. That's crazy. Can you imagine you get this once in a lifetime opportunity to go compete overseas and then get picked up by this massive org? Like, your career just like kicks into overdrive just like that. And it's some things we're gonna touch on next week, but just to like touch on it a little bit now. I think that's one of our biggest things that we crave, that we want, is international recognition for Rocket League. And biggest thing is RLCS. We just want that recognition to be able to compete, but not to get in like too much into it. But I mean, it still comes down to that these brands, these big sponsorships getting involved, kind of helps us get into that international level, kind of. But it just opens up a lot more doors than we have with just creating a team under some certain name.
No, it's 100% right. Is like, if you think about it, there's a breaking point that's got to come somewhere in any game. Can you make a career out of it? Sports have been around for hundreds of years, so people have got, like, the industry is built around making an actual career. You can go be a professional soccer player or professional rugby or cricket player or something like that. As gaming grows over the next couple of decades, you're going to find that there is going to be a point where a gamer can be a professional gamer. And it's going to come down to, can you afford to live month to month as a gamer? Overwatch has started with the Overwatch League overseas, where the guys get paid a general salary every month to train. I mean, ATK has some teams in some of their games where they pay them a salary, and these guys are training now 6 days a week. And that's the difference between the South African scene and like an international scene for now, is that guys can't afford to train 6 days a week, or there's just no motivation for them to train 6 days a week. You put in 6 days a week of hardcore effort, 3-hour practices every day, and then you come out with 1,000 rand at the end of it. It's not worth it yet. If we can get to that point of growing the scene, growing tournaments, growing sponsors, growing organizers, to the point where people can now quit their day jobs and train as professional Rocket League players, that's when you're going to see the world is going to change for Rocket League, for any game, is when people can now afford to take no job. And then, even if it's just a basic salary for now, but I think we're still quite a few years away from that for most games in South Africa, not just Rocket League. So, the other option that you can do is not just necessarily playing the game for tournaments. You can also play the game and make it as a YouTube or Twitch streamer. That sort of thing is big, that people can use that as an opportunity to get lots of fans. And in South Africa, one of the things that kind of held us back before was that the people who were watching the finals, the people who were watching the streams, were the same small group of Rocket League enthusiasts. So it would be the guys who would go to the LAN finals would be sitting watching the stream to see it. And so, weirdly enough, when we got to the finals, I remember like first and second year VS Gaming, we were still sitting with like 450, 500 views on some of those videos, and that starts to become big. Sponsors take a look at 500 people. I mean, when these guys are sponsoring like local sports teams where they get like 20 people to come and watch their Saturday hockey game or something like that, they were still throwing like 10,000 rand at these guys to go, here, we'll sponsor your team for tournaments. You start to get like 500 or 1,000 views on these videos, that's when sponsors really take it. So, the fact that I've seen a couple new streamers from South Africa coming up in Rocket League being like, I'm new, but I'm really enjoying this game. And so they're entertaining personalities, people hosting their own things. We've seen RLX they came through and they were doing 6-mans where they had those games streamed and people were getting involved. And that also involves the newer players. The new players can come in and go, right, let's watch some South African Rocket League, not just RLCS.
Yeah, no, I mean that is quite a big thing as well. I think that you touched on is content creators in general and streamers and vlogs that are created from those streams. I think it not the only thing that brands and organizations look at just in individual teams, but also a content creator or a vlog or streamer that also brings in so much marketing for a brand, for organization, and through that content creator, and you see a lot of these organizations do it, especially overseas. A lot of these organizations like SSG and Dignitas, they have all these content creators, but not like because they're good at the game, but because they have such a massive fan base. They have so many people watching them, and through that content creator, this brand gets so much exposure, and so much through that they can just market anything, and it reaches like a massive player base. So I think content creators and streams and all that is also one big like promotion point for us to get those brands, get those organizations involved in creating tournaments or just getting recognition, just realizing, okay, there might be some players or there might be a player base to get things going off of. So yeah, streamers, content creators, they should keep doing what they're doing. Some notable names like Papa Capes. He has been, and it's so weird. Like I saw the other day, not the other day, but Capes has gotten it like twice now, where he got raided by these big Rocket League streamers. I think Jorias was one of them, and I can't remember what the other one was. I think Squishy also raided him, and it's so crazy to see that even though we're not as big or as internationally recognized as they are, it's just this odd chance that they get to see you and get to see that you're a South African Rocket League player. And they might be inquisitive. They might be asking you, like, how's the scene? How's this? How's that? They might not. But if they do, that kind of just like gives us massive insight into, okay, they are players here. South Africa, they are some Rocket League players there. They're not just like a country. They do have internet and they do have Rocket League. So I think through that, it's just like crazy to see that there is that kind of recognition. There is that possibility that it might be through the content creators and the streamers.
Yeah, big ups to like the guys who are trying to make a go of it. David Horsborn, one of the most prolific guys around lately. He's trying to be the oldest Rocket League pro in South Africa. Or sorry, the oldest grand champ in the world. He's been pushing hard, and he's done such a good job for the South African Rocket League scene in terms of content creation. We want to get guys involved in the South African scene from overseas. We're going to chat a lot about overseas involvement next week, or in the next podcast when we do this. But those overseas guys, we want to make it to the RLCS. There is no South African qualifier for the RLCS yet. If we can start getting some of the big names to recognize South Africa, that we've got content creators, we want to get them involved in the tournaments. If we could get a couple of the RLCS guys to watch some of our local tournaments, I'm pretty sure they'd be blown away and be like, oh, hang on, we haven't even looked at this scene before, and the fact that we have some good players. I mean, we have some great players here who I think if they went overseas, they could make it into some of the top teams in South Africa. I mean, those guys overseas are not doing anything that we're not doing here. We're doing the flip resets, we're doing the backboard redirects, we're doing the team plays. I think that our guys, we have guys entering like tournaments and stuff like that, weekly tournaments, and coming out as pretty high ranked in those tournaments. So they are already competing, and that's on 200 ping. If we can get some guys to just involve, like that's personally my dream as the caster, is if I could be casting on the RLCS stage, like that would be an absolute dream of mine. And that's the sort of thing that we can build towards as a South African community. So every person who's got a YouTube channel in South Africa, you guys should be advertising it, putting it on the Discord, putting it on the Rocket League South Africa Facebook page, and tweeting it out and getting people involved. And if you like the local players, I'm sure even the local people who just want to watch streams, if they can watch South African players and South African streams, I'm sure that they'd be very excited to do that instead of just watching like the international guys. Yeah, you want to watch the international guys because of the big names. But if we can get some big names in South Africa that are world renowned, that would take off South African Rocket League to a huge extent.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, just getting their recognition, just getting them to recognize us, and as you said, just if by chance somehow those international players get to view some of our Rocket League, I think they would be pleasantly surprised in a way. Like, what, they can actually hit the ball? Like, I thought it was a bunch of plats and golds in this country. What is happening? But I mean, we just to like touch on it lightly as we're running a little bit out of time. Just Snowy, one of the best players, or the best player in our country. When he went overseas, he was able to get, I think the highest he went was like 6th in 1v1. He was like crazy. He was, I sad to see that he didn't climb 2v2 and 3v3. But just in ones, like if he's able to reach that level, like it would be so good to see where our players would be if they didn't have that ping disadvantage. But just I think on that note, Alt, a lot of things that we chatted about today, just like the nostalgic feeling, just going back to where VS started, how they got our scene to actually, and I think we can give them credit just to get the ball rolling for our community. I think they played such a big role into getting the community where it is now, getting the tournament organizers interested to where it is at this point. Sadly, not as much involvement as last year, but I'm hoping there are some things in the pipeline. A lot of teams, so much progression. These players really did put in the time. Some of them, like you said, you moved over to casting. That gave you some other opportunities. Just that general team and player progression was so great to see. LAN events, hoping that comes back, hoping for the best. So these teams and players can get something to work for again, and hopefully there are some prize pools involved in that. But yeah, we will see where this year goes to.
Yeah, that's what we got to do. Is we got to take into consideration games like Counter-Strike have been around since 2004 or 6 or whatever, like when it actually started. It's been around for 15 years. If Rocket League stays around in the competitive scene for 15 years, I have no doubt that we're going to be seeing prize pools like comparable to any of the other games in South Africa. Like that would be, I think it's an optimistic thing to say, but I definitely think that Rocket League lends itself to that sort of thing. So guys need to grind. There's got to be a point to the grind. So we're growing the prize pools. We're growing the tournaments. We've got people like ACGL hosting weekly tournaments that allow new players to get their feet wet and get a taste of the South African scene. We've got people like VS Gaming who they've pulled out of Rocket League now, but they've got to pick it up again at some stage. They're going to see, oh wow, hang on. I mean, Metal States hosted some big tournaments. ATK is the big one recently where they had 32 teams join into that. 32 teams is a really nice commitment from the South African scene. And so if we can keep building the scene, we keep getting big tournaments, we keep getting big prize pools, we keep showing off that we've got the skills for it, the sponsors are going to get involved. We've already had some big sponsors in there, Telkom, Logitech, Asus, all of those guys have come through and already recognized the South African Rocket League scene as a place to invest. As we get that, we get better prize pools. As we get bigger prize pools, we get more viewers on the streams. And that's another thing is, if you guys are listening to this now, watch the South African streams. Even if you just put it on for 10 minutes or you just catch the finals or something like that. Having every tick on those Twitch streams or the YouTube streams or the YouTube videos or something like that, every one of those counts towards the future growth of it. They build on that where people will go, okay, this one had 600 views and that one had 800 views. Okay, hang on, there is a definite growth here. If we get in early, we can sponsor these tournaments. And, it'll make it worthwhile for the players. It'll make it worthwhile for the tournament organizers. It'll make it worthwhile for the sponsors. And if you just keep that snowball progression, this scene is live and well, man. This scene is growing so healthily.
Oh yeah, for sure. And as you guys heard, Alt just laying out the life cycle of South African Rocket League tournaments. But I think on that note, Alt, it has been a great time chatting about these teams and general nostalgia and LAN events. But I think that is where we'll end the podcast for this week. I have been Skillsteel and with me Altrism. We will see you next week or whenever.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.